Hello and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to take a bit of a dive in a different direction and talk about engine gaskets. Now that's a bit of a, might be a familiar situation to some of us who've been working on older bikes. Availability, specifically when you're talking about OEM gaskets, can get a little sketchy. I'm talking about my 87 here. Was able to find at least a top end kit without too much trouble. The bottom end kit, nearest one I could find was like England, I think. And it was going to be hyper expensive. So I got the top end kit with the understanding that I need to figure out some sort of solution for all the clutch cover gaskets, all these things basically are gasketed mating surfaces. So I've got a lot of parts I need to make gaskets for. And 20 bucks a pop or whatever, even for the aftermarket ones. Aftermarket tends to be available in a kit, doesn't tend to be available to just buy them a la carte, so to speak. So, if you're like me, you probably found yourself wondering or hoping that there was a simple or easy DIY way to make gaskets yourself. And I think today we might take a look at doing that process. So, again, a little bit of a word on gaskets. We are talking about fiber gaskets here. We're not talking about the steel ones. For example, this guy here, this is a cylinder head gasket, cylinder gasket. It's made out of stainless steel. There's no way to make this on your own. So you just got to buck up and buy the kit. But if you're talking about fiber gaskets, whether it's this impregnated rubber fiber material here, or the standard fiber, it's actually pretty easy to cut this stuff out, and it's dirt cheap to do it too. So here's a basic overview of what we're going to need. We've got our gasket material. I've got one 164-inch tan fiber sheet, Carapac. Carapac, incidentally, is one of those products that some weird reason everybody seems to like. So I've used it a little bit and never had any complaints myself. So that's going to do us today. We're going to be primarily relying upon the 132nd-inch Carapac here. I've measured these. I've got a thickness on them, and the 132nd is as close as possible. You generally want to go one size thicker so that when it compresses, it's about right. But the most common sizes are 1/64th, 1/32nd, and 1/16th here. This is a fairly nice gasket. This came up from Mr. Gasket. And you'd probably want to use this in higher pressure, higher temperature applications. And that's specifically called for a thicker gasket like this. Now, crucially, we're going to try to do this without really relying upon arts and crafts skills at all. I don't want to be farting around with pencils or crayons and glue sticks and all that stuff. Really, for one thing, I have next to no art skills whatsoever. So I've tried the trace method before, where you essentially put a piece of paper down, trace the outside of your part, lift it off, and then kind of trying to eyeball the inside. That method honestly kind of sucks. Takes forever. And it's really hard to get these little bolt holes all in alignment. But anyway, so as far as crafting goes, we're going to actually use a scanner. We're going to clean up these parts. We're going to put them on top of a photocopier or scanner, make a copy of the part, and then, at least if it's a clean one, we will get a nice visible band on a piece of paper that we can use to pattern our gasket on. At that point, it's just a matter of taping the pattern down on top of the fiber itself and cutting it out with scissors. Now for punching the holes out, do recommend one of these. I snagged this from my wife's sewing room. You can use punches, I guess, but it kind of, again, it's not very good. Tends to leave a really rough edge, and the fiber sheet kind of wants to stretch. It doesn't really necessarily want to slice. Don't use a drill though. Drills definitely don't work for this. So, as you might expect, first step is going to be to clean the parts. Well, actually, no, I'm wrong. First step is to get a good look at each of the gaskets. Make sure A, that they're the correct thickness for the materials you have, and that B, they're generally simple shapes, i.e. they go all around the outside of the part. Some gaskets are complicated. They'll have different passageways in them, different holes that aren't necessarily intuitive. So it's a good idea before you start hacking this away to just make sure that you have an understanding of whether it's a simple or complicated design. And even taking a picture would probably be worth some bonus points. But anyway, This one's simple. So I'm just going to give this a little soak, and previous owner was kind enough to use some epoxy, like a yellow adhesive on this, along with basically everything else in the bike. This is one of those things where if you've never tried to remove epoxy from an aluminum part, you would never know how horrible it is. But this is why people use Permatex. Permatex is actually designed so that if it comes in contact with solvent, it'll dissolve. Well, it'll kind of re-rubberize, which makes it really easy and perfect to remove from these sort of parts. But yeah, so as I say, a bit of a PSA, do not use epoxy-based adhesives to attach your gasket onto your part. Because that means whoever has to take it off really gets to fight with it. This comes back, if you know how to make your own gaskets, you don't have to reuse the ones once you remove them. If you just keep some gasket material in stock, then it makes it much easier to, you know, if you have to take your clutch cover off for some reason, you can just make a new gasket for it on the spot. If you have the skills and the materials to do so, it's no big deal. Versus, you know, some of the elaborate lengths people go to try to make this thing seal up when they're reusing the gaskets. But anyway, you can use a razor blade for this. And you'll probably see me do this enough times that there's no reason to watch it now. So out of respect for your time, turn the camera off and come back when this part's clean. So, once we've got all the parts cleaned, we can basically take these, put them right on a photocopier. I wound up using a scanner. Didn't film the process because it happened to be a work asset I was using. But what you'll get is a whole bunch of photocopies looking like this. And these are just fine to work off. For bonus points, you can actually flip it horizontally so that you can mirror match the part. Because if you photocopy it, it'll actually be upside down, if that makes any sense. So you need to flip it horizontally in order to make it work properly. At least if you wanted to check the fitment first. But this would be perfectly fine to work with. You might also want to put a ruler on for scale. Just make sure that you get final print size that reflects the original size of the part. And if you really want to go above and beyond, you can use the scanner function instead and actually come up with a neat little template like this. And so, so I built this one. I'll put a link in the description because it's digitized. May as well share it with anyone who needs it. And this is going to allow us basically lay out our gasket sheet and cut them all out at once. It's going to save some materials and make it a little easier for us. Now the larger ones will generally be trickier. Especially this one. This one actually didn't fit on the scanner bed completely, so I had to take two images and amalgamate them using digital editing tools. But this one looks pretty good. The nice thing about using these gaskets is all these parts, if I get one of these gaskets wrong and it starts leaking, I can just unbolt the part, redo the gasket, or at that point go buy an OEM gasket, and then put it back together. I don't need to take the whole engine apart to access any of these parts here. And you really wouldn't want to. If you say it was a crankcase on a smaller dirt bike, I know some of those take paper gaskets. You'd want to be pretty confident with the process before attempting to make one of those gaskets yourself. But just my own experience there. Can be done. These larger pieces can be useful if we screw up one of these smaller ones. We can use this instead of having to cut apart some fresh sheet. Now stapler comes in handy for this. And as you'd expect, just get our scissors out and cut this out. Scissors are better for this than knives. Knives. You can use a box cutter, but you find you just end up wrestling with it. And especially the curved parts are pretty difficult to do with a knife. Now when it comes time to do these tricky inside corners here, scissors aren't your best friend for that. You actually want to use a hole punch. So you can kind of get in close. And snap that out. And that'll allow you to get the scissors in there easily. Now when you're done, you should have yourself a nice gasket-shaped object. And it's never a bad idea to test fit these things, so just have some spare bolts. These are M6 6mm bolts. And incidentally, these holes here, the 1/4" hole punch works perfectly for them, because that translates to about 6 mils. I'll just check to see how badly off this is. Obviously we can trim a little if we need to. Depends how fancy you want to get. I mean, I'm of the view that these are more of a practical item than an aesthetic item. So as long as it holds fluid, it'll be just fine for me. So I think we've got ourselves a winner. You do want to check for stretching, or if it was pinching up, that'd be an indication that the holes were too far apart. But this is fine, feels loose. It's got a teensy amount of wiggle room, which is just right. And yeah, ready to call that one a winner. So, with this newfound skill, as I say, it's really does come in handy if parts are a long ways away, or if you're working on something again that, you know, parts aren't as easily available. Gasket kits are still normally available. I know, for example, well, you really want to check the forums are a good place to check to see if people have had particularly good or bad experiences with various brands. A lot of times, a brand that's really good for a certain bike might not be as good for another, just because maybe their pattern wasn't as high quality. But anyway, I think we can call this a win. Thanks for watching.